Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we are opening up the ultimate vault. Look, for anyone who's ever collected sports cards, Pokémon cards, or really trading cards of any kind, you know PSA is the giant in the room. They literally hold the power to turn a $10 piece of cardboard into a $10,000 treasure. But for years, exactly what happens inside that grading room has been completely shrouded in mystery. Well, today, that changes. We're pulling back the curtain using a fascinating interview from Boston Card Hunter to uncover the intense pressure, the hidden rules, and the closely guarded secrets of the grading floor. But hey, before we jump in, I want to promise you something. I know there is just a ton of automated, generic AI slop flooding the internet right now. But please, stick around because this is a meticulously researched, human-crafted explainer. We put an enormous amount of effort into digging through this research to get you the actual facts, plain and simple. So, if you appreciate this kind of deep dive, no-nonsense content, hit that like button to support the work. It really, really helps us out.
All right, Section 1, Inside the Grading Floor.
Okay, let's dive into this. We're getting our inside look from a recent interview with a guy named Robert, who actually worked right there on the grading floor at PSA. Now, when you get hired, you don't just sit down on day one and start slapping numbers on Michael Jordan rookies. No way. New hires go through a pretty strict apprenticeship model. They sit with veterans, process proxy submissions, and just get a feel for the rhythm of the room. And what's wild here is that so many people assume PSA has this top secret internal master rubric, like some tricky metric only the elite insiders know about. But Robert confirmed that simply isn't true. Graders are trained strictly on the public standards already available on PSA's website. They learn the exact same definitions for a PSA 10 versus a PSA 1 that you or I can go read online right now. There's no hidden agenda. But how they apply those public standards? That happens in a highly disciplined, almost factory-like environment. The rules on the floor are incredibly strict. Graders have to keep their hands meticulously clean at all times. I mean, zero tolerance for any dirt or oil getting anywhere near these collectibles. You're also not allowed to sit there and chat about the grades of specific cards with your coworkers while you're working. And lunch? Well, the facility is in this industrial area, so employees rely heavily on approved food trucks out in the parking lot. And no, you absolutely cannot go grab a beer on your lunch break. It's a strict zero-tolerance policy for alcohol or literally anything that could impair a grader's vision or judgment. Moving right along to Section 2, the need for speed. So PSA is currently dealing with a massive influx of submissions. The hobby has just exploded, right? And to keep up with that endless mountain of cardboard, the graders have to move incredibly fast. And this brilliantly illustrates just what we mean by fast. We're talking about an estimated 500 to 700 cards processed by a single grader in a standard 8-hour shift. Just let that number sink in for a second. If you're working an 8-hour shift and you factor out time for lunch and just basic restroom breaks, hitting those numbers requires an unbelievable, relentless pace. Honestly, Robert said it best firsthand. He said, whatever you think a human being is supposed to grade in a day, multiply it by 2, maybe 3. That is the breakneck reality of working on the grading floor. The incoming packages, they just never stop. And graders are basically expected to be relentless processing machines just to keep the backlog from spiraling completely out of control. So mathematically, if you have a quota of 500 to 700 cards a day, that means graders are spending mere seconds on each card, easily under a minute. They're not, staring at your card under a microscope for 5 minutes, contemplating the meaning of life. They are looking at the borders, checking the edges, analyzing the surface under the light, hitting the grade, and boom, immediately moving to the next item in the stack. Which means I have to ask you guys directly. Could you actually do this? Could you maintain focus grading 500 cards a day without going insane? Take a second and comment below. Tell me if you honestly think you have the mental stamina to stare at trading cards for 8 hours straight at a rate of 1 card every 45 seconds without making a single mistake. Because I know for a fact I would struggle. All right, Section 3, Vintage versus Modern Cards. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is seeing how, with that insane speed in mind, PSA handles older, delicate cards that are super easy to damage or counterfeit. There's a really clear division of labor here. If you send in a 2023 Panini Prism card, it's very likely being handled by a newer grader on the floor. Those modern cards are made of chrome and metallic finishes, right? They're rigid, they're relatively hard to accidentally bend. But vintage cards, those strictly cardboard items from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, those are exclusively sent to a specialized team. We're talking the 20-year OG veterans of the company. PSA knows vintage cards are frequently altered, trimmed, or faked, so they do not let the rookies touch them. Section 4, Blind Grading and Bias. Okay, we have to tackle the biggest, most toxic debate in the entire collecting hobby, the idea of bias. For years, collectors have argued on forums that massive million-dollar submitters, famous influencers, or celebrities are getting preferential treatment. So the absolutely crucial thing to understand is how PSA actively prevents this through 100% blind grading. According to the interview, the grader sitting at the desk looking at the physical card has zero identifying information about who actually owns it. It literally doesn't matter if it's a massive corporate submitter, a famous athlete, or just a random guy from Ohio sending in his childhood collection. All of that info is completely hidden. There is no name on the stack of cards. All the grader sees is a pile of plastic sleeves and a randomized barcode with a submission number, and that is the whole shebang. They grade the cardboard right in front of them without any context regarding who is paying for the service, which ensures complete 100% anonymity. Furthermore, the interview debunked another massive conspiracy theory: population control. Guys, graders have zero quotas for PSA 10s. There is absolutely no internal pressure or target limit telling graders, hey, you can only hand out 5 pristine grades today. If a card earns a 10 based on the public rubric, it gets a 10. They are not artificially restricting perfect grades just to keep the market scarce. I know we all have friends in our hobby groups who swear up and down that grading is rigged against the little guy. So please do them a favor and share this explainer with them. Drop the link in your Discord servers, put it in your Facebook groups, and help settle these long-standing community debates with actual, on-the-floor facts. Section 5. Quality control and accountability. Now, you might be sitting there wondering, okay, if they're grading completely blind and moving at 700 cards a day, how on earth do they avoid making massive, expensive mistakes? Well, graders are heavily monitored. PSA runs routine inconsistency checks on their staff. If a grader's work is constantly getting flagged or requiring regrading during quality control checks, they face strict discipline. PSA tracks exactly who is overgrading or undergrading compared to their baseline standards, and they absolutely do not let wild inconsistencies slide without stepping in to correct the employee. Let's move to and see how this builds when we introduce serious money into the equation. What happens when a $100,000 card hits the floor? They use a multi-person escalation process. An initial grader might look at it first, sure, but it doesn't stop there. It then goes to a tenured grader for a secondary review, and finally, a senior or master grader is going to step in to do a final check. Like Robert noted, they do not mince words when giving out the correct grade on these massive items. PSA fully understands the financial liability and the market impact of a 6-figure card. They absolutely, unequivocally do not take a single new guy's word for it when life-changing value is on the line. The whole process slows down and becomes much more collaborative. So ultimately, what we see inside the block box is this very delicate balancing act between speed and accuracy. For modern bulk submissions, your standard base rookies and low-end chrome cards, PSA relies on those high-speed quotas just to churn through the massive backlog. But for vintage material and high-risk, high-value grails, they completely shift gears into intense, multi-veteran scrutiny to protect the integrity of the slab. Which leaves us with a final, pretty provocative thought. Knowing the actual reality of the grading floor, what do you prefer? Would you rather have faster turnaround times knowing graders are evaluating your cards in mere seconds? Or would you prefer slower, much more deliberate grading, even if it meant waiting a full year to get your cards back? It's a fascinating trade-off, for sure. If you enjoyed this deep dive and you want to see more complex topics made simple, make sure to hit subscribe. We have a lot more incredible explainers coming your way. See you next time.